Are you ready to transform your normal e-commerce business into one that experiences exponential growth year after year using online advertising? If so, this show is for you. Me and my guests will show you how you too can grow your e-commerce business to 7 or even 8 figures so you can go on more luxurious vacations, spoil yourself and your family, say yes to more opportunities, and become financially free so you never have to worry about money again. Welcome to the E-commerce Performance Marketing Show. Hey, how's it going, guys? Josh Marsden here, host of the E-com Performance Marketing Show. And I have another incredible guest for you today, and I keep bringing it to you every single week, and I have this guy right here, Josh Boone. Now, Josh is somewhat of a tenured digital marketer. He has 15 years of experience. So he was here in digital marketing way before it got hot, So he's got a lot of experience that we can dive into on today's show. That's going to provide a ton of value to you. He's also an advisor, a speaker, and a growth strategist as well. So I'm really excited to dive in this conversation and to really help you get as much value as possible out of this episode. So let's welcome Josh to the episode. Josh, welcome.
Thanks, man. That was an awesome intro. How's your day going?
Good. Yeah, I mean, I know we were talking just prior to the recording, but yeah, day's going good, busy. COVID, obviously, like we talked about, is affecting everybody, but life goes on and you just keep driving.
Yep, beat goes on.
Yep. Well, can you tell the audience a little bit more about yourself, your background, and especially how you got started, 15 years ago, which is impressive.
Yeah. So I got started probably even more than that at this point, probably 17 or so. But wow. I was a kid. I know I look young, but I was about 13 or so, and my dad had a tree service. He still has a tree service. He's ran it for about 30 years. And I grew up in the tree industry, going on estimates out with him when I was very young, and just learning how to, kind of naturally. It's kind of funny as a consultant now. It kind of came pretty natural, just seeing how he talked to customers and the whole thing, bidding jobs, all this other stuff. But when I was about 13 or so, I got really into building websites. It's just kind of a hobby, and I was like, I want to build my dad a website. And so, I was back in the crude wild west days of search optimization and everything. We just throw some keywords on there and he just number one, because particularly back then, I mean, there were no small businesses here in Ohio that really had a lot of, there wasn't not a lot of competition, particularly in the tree industry. So I'm just built this thing, put some keywords in there, and then he's showing up, and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of power in this. His phone's ringing, and I can see it happening. And we got a lot of people trying to sell us Yellow Page hats back in the day and all that stuff. And I was looking at that and knowing how much that cost, and then looking at the ROI on this, and I'm like, wow. So the next thing I know, his small business friends start asking me, contractors, people that have landscaping businesses start asking me to build websites for them. I'm now, 13, 14 and freelancing and building these stuff. So then I start building my own websites. And I'm like, okay, well, this is costing me money. How do I make money off of this? These websites that I'm building, because now I have kind of communities that I'm building. So then I started getting into affiliate marketing, e-com, and I have a network of affiliate websites I ran for many years, and then kind of burnt out on that and wanted to work with more of the businesses like my dad's again. So went through. Briefly worked at an agency. I kind of wanted to see what it was like having, working with somebody that had a lot more experience. And again, I grew up with the small business background where, I didn't have a normal job and situation. So I'm I did this and I saw everything what not to do. I lasted 3 months there and I'm like, nope, this is terrible. And basically decided to start my own agency. And then I just kind of did that for several years, about 3 years or so, and did pretty well. And then we ended up kind of meeting with another local group that started an agency, and just kind of merged after we started working together, and things just blew up. We went from 4 people to about a team of over 10, and we had a downtown downtown office space, and we were doing quite well and growing fast. Got to work on some really cool projects, but then also I was working 100+ hour weeks. I developed an ulcer and I just burnt out.
Wow.
It was really awesome. And then I don't know, I kind of, it was really cool, but I just, my heart wasn't in it anymore. And I think there was ways to turn it around. We tried to bring in some consultants and stuff like that to see how we could do it better, but I don't know, my heart just wasn't in it anymore. I think it was just being spread so thin across so many different clients and just not really being able to truly deep dive into the work. And I started seeing a lot more opportunity for us to help with a lot of these brands in on a much more in-depth way. And it was kind of demoralizing just being like, man, that's a problem I'd really like to solve, and I'd like to help them with this, but we just don't have the time and effort. And so anyway, yeah, I exited the agency, sold everything I had, bought an RV, and just traveled the country for 2 years here in the United States. And it was awesome. It was really cool.
That's cool. I envy that. That's awesome.
It was cool. So
are you currently in an RV?
Oh, no.
Okay, I just like the background, that's why.
Yeah. No, I just got the.
It's a car. Got it.
Yeah.
Totally fooled me, man. I really thought that was like a window with trees behind you. That's awesome.
That'd be cool. That'd be dope. I would be really impressed that I'd have the internet connection. Like, I just got like a gigabit, like 4G
satellite on the top of your RV.
Yeah. I actually did have that. I actually had an antenna that was like a booster. So like, you could go out in the middle of nowhere, and as long as you could get a cell signal, you use Verizon, which surprisingly with all marketing dollars aside that they do, I mean, like, their network pretty good. So like, you put the booster on that thing, and you could get pretty remote with that thing and still work remote. But yeah, anyway, I did the traveling for a while, and the whole time I'm kind of thinking about, what do I do? There's a shelf life on that. Eventually it's like, you want to do something else, and so I'm like, what's the next step? And I did some consulting just to kind of test it while I was on the road, and I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of the things that I liked about working with the clients, but it having a much more personal relationship and not having all the overhead was quite attractive to me. So decided I wanted to move back, and I wanted to kind of have a home base again after traveling. And the thing that was really interesting though was like, I want to solve a really hard problem, and that's kind of what ties us in with what we're working on now. Was a lot of those businesses I was working with in the agency space, like I said, there was a lot of reoccurring issues we started seeing, and a lot of it was we were working with all different types of industries, different business models, everything, like hundreds and hundreds of different types of businesses. And a lot of them had a lot of the same issues, but they were in completely different industries, and some of them had solutions, but it was very common knowledge in some industries, but in others it was very foreign. They just didn't even know a solution even existed. And when I would kind of just tease like, hey, there's a solution here that these guys found, they're like, oh, well, that might work in this industry, that's not going to work in ours. And I was just like, nah, I think it will. And some of them I would kind of give them recommendations. You should check this book out, you should do this, or you should talk to this person. And some of them would take it and run with them, and take it and run with it, and they got a lot of it really helped them a lot, and they were very surprised by it. And I had a lot of ideas. I'm like, there's a lot of experimentation we could do here, and I just never really got the opportunity to kind of go down that rabbit hole. And then when I started consulting, I'm like, oh, that's what I want to do. I didn't want to just do consulting. I wanted to do something else, and so that was kind of the unique thing we've been working on the last 2 years, and it's been really, really cool.
It's great. Sounds like we're on similar trajectories, just because I recently started a few months ago the RM5 Formula Accelerator, which is basically it's a coaching program over 12 months that has 8 modules where I teach and help e-com businesses implement my RM5 formula, strategy, and process that has led to some significant results for e-com clients on the agency side. And it actually works outside of e-com as well, but our marketing is all about e-com. And sounds like you're doing something very similar in that you're basically trying more of a one-to-many model where you could have more impact and also just less overhead.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that there's a lot of problems with the agency model as a whole. The last 2 years, I've been having a lot of conversations with consultancy and agency owners and founders, and talking with them about almost like open sourcing kind of a new model. Because that's the thing. When I start talking about like the issues with the burnout of the agency life, everyone's like, yeah, I understand. Like, even if the thing is, the model just kind of inherently gets you to that space where you're just overextended, and you constantly are juggling like revenue in, expenses, overhead, the whole thing. And it's been really kind of interesting talking with, is that once you start opening up about it, everybody else starts opening up with you about a lot of the issues that they're having themselves. Even if they're successful, and even if they're happy doing what they're doing, there's still ways to improve it. And the thing that is coming up time and time again is that there's a fundamental issue with the model, and a lot of people are trying to kind of figure out what that solution is, and different. And some of them are in various spots of doing that. So it's been interesting just kind of seeing over the last like 2 years with agencies. Probably the work that we do, but almost exclusively, is with actual brands, e-commerce, brands. But just as an aside, just for me as a passion project, just talking with all these agency owners and being like, okay, well, what are you doing over there? What are you doing in New York? Hey, in Arizona, what are you doing over there? Like, what's working? And just kind of, we're all just kind of passing knowledge. It's really, really interesting. Everybody's talking about it increasingly. So I think that the temperature is there, that there's a demand for a shift. I think we all realize that the way that the relationship between agencies and brands, and also the other insidious part, VC, the incentive, it's all not aligned together. All three of those factors are just not really in alignment. They're not optimizing for the right things. So I definitely see a lot of disruption. Not just the COVID thing, I think, has just honestly sped it up. I don't think it's causing it. So it's pretty interesting.
No, I could relate to all that. Well, I've built my business to a point where I'm pretty hands off for the most part. I check in, with my team daily, but that's literally it. And the rest of everything is completely, in a way, on autopilot, where my team members have specific roles, specific responsibilities, specific expectations, because I built the culture from the ground up to be all about client results and the client experience, and everything kind of traces back to that. And people have different responsibilities and tasks that they're responsible for, and I just make sure that people are just doing their job through my director of operations, who basically is like managing the company almost like the CEO, at least on the operation side, whereas the marketing and sales side is already just running, and we have a system in place for that, and I have team members handling different aspects of that, and that's literally it at this point for me. But I can totally relate to burnout. I mean, I've been through burnout so many times, for sure, where I was working 16, 18-hour days, several days a week, and into grind, and you constantly have to pick yourself back up and re-motivate yourself, and re-energize yourself, and coach yourself that this is the process, this is the path, and it's worth it. And I'm actually really excited though for the future. I know I told you a little bit before the interview, but also I just told the audience as well that I recently started my accelerator, which I'm really passionate about, because it just allows me to help a lot of e-com businesses at once. And it's something that I'm just really, really passionate about, that has definitely fueled a lot of my fire here in 2020, especially as we try to prevent ourselves from getting depressed because we can't go to the gym, we can't go out and hang out with friends. I mean, the gym part is the biggest thing for me, because I love the gym, and it's not the same, but it's okay, it's all good.
Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, the sauna, I bought a sauna for the house, and like it's been a game changer. It's been an absolute game changer. If I didn't have that, I would lose my mind. That plus a cold shower, it's like the awakening. I've never really been like a huge gym person, but the sauna has been absolute game changer for me.
Totally.
And I think that pivot, not necessarily like a pivot per se, but like that thing where it seemed like, okay, I've got the agency, like we're kind of got this thing on autopilot. What's next? And like that, I think that conversation where you're just like, how can you have the most amount of value for people? I think it's really, really great that you did that, because a lot of the founders that I talk to, they allow either the coasting, like if things are good, they just kind of coast, and the idle minds, like they just kind of start burning out for a different reason, or they just work themselves to the ground and they start doing these random acts of improvement. So I'm curious, like what's worked for you? What's worked for you for the burnout?
Well, I do want to get this, relate this back to e-com businesses, because e-com business is primarily going to watch this, so I want to really make sure that, we do that. But I will say this, though, about that real quick. I think it just comes down to lifestyle, over the past, I'm a single dad too. So it's like, I've been running a business, growing it since 2013, and I've been raising a son who is now 11. So, and the sacrifice at one point came in my own personal life, where I wasn't going out as much at all, really. And I was working all the time or spending time with my son. It wasn't until the past, like, I'd say 2.5 years, I really started to really care about myself and my social life and dating even and all those things. And because up to that point, I was like, I kept things small on that front. I just focused on my son. I focused on business, and I was just driven to drive my business to be successful. But lifestyle choices though that really help handle stress would have to be like diet, exercise. I know it sounds kind of cliche, but honestly, that stuff really matters. And then since January 1st of last year, 2019, I added meditation every single day, which has been, it's weird how it's been a game changer. I say that because I didn't think for a million years I would be this guy that like is all about meditation. But now I do like 20-minute meditations in the morning. Now my mornings are like super structured, especially during the summer, because during the summer the best time to get out in Arizona is in the morning because the temperature sucks during the day. So I jog, like for example this morning, I woke up, went on a jog, jogged a few miles, came back, ate breakfast, and then took my supplements, and then showered, meditated for 20 minutes, did red light therapy as I was meditating, and then I got ready for the day, and that was that. And I actually, to your point with the dry sauna thing, and something that I'd recommend to our audience here, going through like a jacuzzi or dry sauna for a few minutes after a workout in the morning, and then hopping over to a cold plunge if you have access to it. That's been awesome too. Like I've started doing that over the past few weeks at the gym that I go to, and it is open. It's just not fully open. Like they do their classes on the roof instead of in the building. For
Interesting.
So they're going around the laws a little bit, and that's been awesome. And I got that from Tony Robbins, because that's what Tony Robbins does every morning.
No, I mean the heat shock, the therapy has been amazing. Doing the hot and the cold. One of the things I've been kind of doing is getting in the sauna and just going as long as I possibly can, and then getting in a cold shower is ice cold as I get. In the summer here, it's cold, but it's not icy cold. But in the winter here in Ohio, it's frigid. And it's awesome. And then I'll usually kind of like wait a couple minutes to acclimate, and then I'll just get back in the sauna. And I might do that like 2 or 3 times, and by the end I'm just like, woo! Like I'm shot out of a cannon. And the thing is, like you were saying, like relaying it back to e-com, and it's just like to be honest with you, I think these are the conversations that in a lot of ways are the most important, because
absolutely.
If you're a founder or you're a director, head of e-com, whatever, I think it's so easy to get caught up in the tactics and whatever. We don't really take care of ourselves. And particularly with founders, a lot of the work that I've been doing unintentionally, really, it's just kind of organically happened, is like I'll be working with these founders, and you have a very personal relationship with them, and then you start talking with them, and it almost becomes business therapy a lot of the time, where they'll start opening up, and a lot of particularly when you start getting in the brand positioning, you start talking about why is it that you guys exist, why is it what you do, and sometimes they'll go years and just not really think about that too much, because they're just kind of iterating off of what's been working. So they don't really get to the cause. And a lot of times when we're coming in thinking about, the performance marketing or any of this other stuff, we'll start asking those fundamental whys. And they start thinking about why they started the business to begin with and why they're doing what they're doing. And it's almost like this kind of mini existential crisis, where it's like business existential crisis, like, why am I doing what I'm doing? And it starts really, you start really getting to interesting topics from that. And it starts really causing them to think about long-term planning, both strategically, but even just philosophically, with their business and what they're doing, what they're doing. And I think the COVID thing, absolutely, because sometimes it's like some of these founders, they'll get to year 5, 6, 7, and they'll just be like, why am I even doing this anymore? And that kind of happened with me with my business. After I had the agency for about 3 years, and then we merged, and then that lasted about 3 years. So as an entity, it was kind of like 6 years in agency world for me, running an agency. And I got to year 6, and I'm just like, man, why am I even doing this? And it's like there's no different if it's agency, brand. It doesn't really matter what side you're on. a team's a team, a mission's a mission, and it's just like I think those whys and also taking care of yourself, I think are so very vital and important, and they unfortunately don't get talked about as much. So
yeah, it's a big point, man, and you're absolutely right. You know, those watching, listening to this, you know, taking care of yourself should be absolutely number one, because your business can't perform at its best if you are not at your best. And I had a good friend, he kind of took like a mentorship position in my life, you know, because he's older, and you know, a few years ago he told me like, hey, always take care of yourself first. In order for your business to be at its best, you have to be at your best. And I took that to heart, and you know, I've been practicing that ever since. You know, going back to your experience, because you have like a wealth of experience, I'd love for us to dive in there. You know, what has been like your biggest e-com success to date that you could share with the audience, that the audience could learn quite a bit from as well?
Yeah, so it kind of ties in with what we were just talking about. Like, a lot of times these businesses, like if you're e-com and let's say you're venture backed even more so, you scale really fast. Like some of these brands that I've been working with, they get to year like 3 and 4, and like they've got 60, 70, 100 employees, and they're just growing. And like a lot of the time that happens is that their processes just start breaking down. And they get so caught up in these OKRs and just kind of chasing the revenue and all this other stuff that they kind of get down this path of almost like random acts of improvement and just trying to hit these OKRs and doing whatever else. But a lot of the more long-term things that actually would account for a lot more revenue in the long run get deprioritized for like, oh, okay, well, we had success with this last paid social campaign. Let's just double down and just do more of that and put all of our spend there and put all of our effort there. And it's very short-term in nature. And, you know, I think what's happening right now is, particularly with the COVID situation, a lot of people are becoming, they can't hide it anymore over just bringing in all this revenue and then hiding all these issues. So one of the biggest examples for us was kind of actually what was the case study, kind of the test case for all the work that we've been doing over the last 2 years. Is we started working with a brand that had rapid growth, and they were very successful and still are. And we're doing quite well, but they were just scaling so fast that all of their performance marketing stuff just started kind of collapsing upon itself, because they just started bringing more and more people on, and their strategies just weren't growing. And it's not that any of it wasn't that they were doing a bad job of anything. It's just there was massive like low-hanging fruit and huge bottlenecks and huge gaps. So one of the things that, you know, kind of has come out of that is we've been describing things in terms of blind spots and opportunities. So when we start working with a brand, what we're doing is basically trying to identify what are the blind spots internally, what are your blind spots strategically, and then also what are the blind spots of your competitors. And those blind spots, your competitors' blind spots, are your opportunities that you can seize on, and vice versa.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a lot of companies unfortunately focus on is the opportunities, but they don't focus on the blind spots, and they don't look at almost like the defensive armor, what they need to do to protect against, you know, competitors, because that's what's happening right now, like with the COVID situation. And like, let's say, for example, you are really overly reliant on paid social, for example, like paid spend. Well, let's say like the effectiveness of that went down, or it got more expensive or whatever else. You know, the end result is that it's just not converting as well. But let's say one of your competitors is experiencing the same problem, but they invested in a lot of organic and a lot of other avenues. So they have that, you know, they have the SEO, they have all this other stuff, they had paid and organic search and all these other things. You know, maybe they invested in more organic communities like Reddit and stuff like that. Well, they still have that to pull from. So what's happening is now their ROAS is tanking with their, you know, their one main channel, but the other competitors have all these other channels that either, what's happening is now they are able to catch up, or if that other brand was catching up to you, well, they've now caught up, they're catching up, and that is something where that's a lagging indicator. You're not really going to see the effects of that truly for another 6 to 9 months, maybe 12 months, depending on your industry. And by then, the damage is done. And that is so. Or if it's the other way, if you were catching up with a competitor, but now you're lagging behind again, and you're not making progress, well, now they've just got exponential growth forward.
Yeah,
so
for sure. Shows how important omni-channel strategies are, and not just depending on one channel, which a lot of businesses do. I think then when businesses are young and they're just getting started, that's fine, because you don't want to splinter your time anyway, and you need to just laser focus and just double down and just get one channel working for your business. But then once you do that and you've got a good process system in place for management and optimization, and you're seeing steady ROAS, then by all means, like what you're saying is like absolute wisdom.
Yeah, I think the reason why I'm seeing the same thing, and the issue is I'm seeing the same thing, particularly in the essence that they either are trying too many things when they're starting out, their seed stage, and they're just like, we want to do everything, and it's just like, slow your roll, calm down.
Yep.
Let's pick one or two and really try and get everything dialed in, because a lot of it comes down to like you need to identify, and this will kind of go in with the next thing, is like you need to identify. You have a lot of assumptions particularly when you're starting out. You have a lot of assumptions about who your customer is and what your unique differentiating factor is. We need to test that. We really need to get that dialed in, and you need to pick one or two channels. Depending on your industry, maybe it's 3, maybe it's whatever. It doesn't matter. You need to pick a handful of channels and really focus and figure that stuff out, and then you can take that and say, okay, now how can we apply that to this? How can we apply that to this thing? And start branching out and start slowly building it up. Particularly VC-backed companies, there's so much pressure for scale. They just want to do everything immediately. And there's all this pressure like, oh, well, that company's doing this. We need to emulate them. We need to do all these things. And like, it's like dogs chasing cars. It's just all over the place. But one of the main things that we do is going in and saying, okay, all those assumptions, how can we strategically test that? Mm-hmm. And how can we come up with, what are these assumptions? And we do this assumption testing. So one example with the brand is when that first brand that was kind of the case study for all of this, we came in there. What was really, the agency, you're used to, founder, CMO, marketing director, whatever. You have that primary point of contact, and you might talk to the develop team or whatever else, but you don't really truly get super deep in their organization. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm like, no, I want to do the opposite of that. I want to talk to everybody. Support, customer support, product development. I want to talk to everybody. And so we did that. And we just started doing almost like some internal surveys. I just started having very casual conversations with people, and I'm like, well, what is this brand to you? And everybody gave me a different answer. Everybody gave me different answers. And I was just like, this is a problem. And what's interesting is it wasn't just their team. It was also like even the way in their PR, and like, for example, like they had a lot of influencers that were either on Instagram or like bloggers that were writing about their products and doing product reviews. They were all using completely different language, and it was really confusing. And I kind of asked them, if you were to go into Google and type in, you couldn't use any of the brand name, and you couldn't just type in like the base industry. You had to be kind of somewhat specific. What would you type in to find it? People mm-hmm. had a really hard time.
Wow.
And I'm like, that's a problem. You're not unique enough. Like you need to figure out what that is. Your messaging is all over the place. So that's where it kind of started. And I'm like, okay, we need to figure out what that key phrase is, because it's not just about search. It's not just about performance marketing. It's about aligning the team and the mission, because again, they grew really fast. And now everybody started having different ideas of what the brand was and what it represented. And that's not just a messaging issue. That's an alignment issue. It's a leadership issue. It's a management issue.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
One of the things that we started seeing is that there was a lot of fragmentation in their team. And you had the splintering where like the omnichannel thing, it was like different departments, and they were all completely working in silos, and they were not like cross-referencing any of their learnings. So I would talk to the social team, and they would have insights that would have been amazing for like the more organic content team, but they just weren't really talking. I mean, they would share quarterly whatever, but they weren't really getting in deep, and there was so much low-hanging fruit there. And one of the things that became very apparent is that because everybody had a different idea of what the company was, when somebody would have a leadership position and they would start, exerting what they thought the business was and the direction it was going, the rest of the team would start pushing back and start being demoralized because it was different than what their interpretation of the business was. And so that would cause this friction where people didn't want to help each other because they thought that it was promoting something that they didn't want. And it started, a lot of egos started getting into place, and the total breakdown of collaboration. And when you're a lean e-commerce team and there's only a handful of you, you're collaborating all the time. You have to. But once it got big enough where you had those silos, everything started breaking down. You started having turnover, which only further increases the gaps in knowledge and expertise and everything. And it all just started getting really bad. So the kind of the singular point of entry, mapping all this out was, let's test all these assumptions. So we looked through, all of the customer surveys that they'd have over the years, all of their internal messaging, all the surveys that we did with their team, everything. And we strategically kind of mapped out into about 18 different concepts of like what the business was and what made them unique. And then we narrowed it down.
Nice. I like how you suggested surveys, because surveys are powerful.
They really are.
Yeah.
Particularly lately, I've been talking with a behavioral scientist, and that's what he specializes in, is using surveys for like founders of startups and helping them gather a lot of this information. I really wish I would have known him back then, because this would have been so amazing, because he's able to do stuff back then that like I wanted to do, but we just didn't have the capabilities. So we could do some really crazy stuff now with that. But yeah, the powers of surveys are nuts.
I know, big time.
Yeah, so we had those 18 concepts, we narrowed it down to 4, and we started testing it. And what we did is we used their paid social and their paid search, and we basically took everything down, worked with the data scientists to try and make it as equalized as possible, and make sure everything was consistent. And we had those 4 brand messaging standpoints. Everything else was the same. Landing pages was going to, body copy, everything else. It was just the initial ad. Everything else was the same. That one line was different, and it was huge. We actually noticed that one of those 4 was the control, which was kind of like the overall kind of generic messaging that they were using. The winner of just that first round had a double the VPC. It was insane. Like it was several. I think it was like 2.5% conversion rate increase. 3%, something like that. It was nuts. So basically, from that, we were like, this is nuts. This is not only. So then we were able to take that and go down to a product level as well. So we were able to look on a product level how those 4 different concepts varied, and it did. I mean, obviously, in the majority of cases, that one was significantly better, but there were outliers where sometimes it was pretty severe. And again, we had a data scientist look at all this, and we were running it where we had millions and millions of impressions where this was statistically significant. And again, the only thing, my hypothesis, my thesis was basically that initial message would actually color the lens in which they viewed the rest of everything. And it did, and it actually changed the end result, and it navigated and influenced the entire buyer customer journey. So now I'm like, now that we know this, not only on an overall branding standpoint, but on a product level as well. Okay, let's take that learning and apply it across the entire brand, and then let's I want to do some other iterations first. But if that continues after further iterations, let's now apply that across the brand. But on a product level, we can now take that messaging angle and tailor the entire customer journey around that. Landing page, photography, copy, email journeys, everything can be tailored around that messaging. And the results of that are just huge. And so that's something that we've been doing with every brand we work with.
Well, that just shows the power of like using survey feedback from your audience to really optimize your messaging, because your audience, that's the key, your messaging. They know exactly how they want to be spoken to, because they know their motivations, they know their pain points, they know what benefits they're seeking, and you can find those out very easily by using surveys. I love how you brought that up.
Yeah, and it's just gathering it and then just testing it. So that was the roundabout way of completing the circle with those brands, was that the in-house team had all that fragmentation, had all that friction where they just felt like they weren't in alignment. Afterwards, we changed it to, okay, well, let's just test these theories. Everybody has all these ideas. Okay, well, let's test it. And then that completely changed the culture, where now they're going in and they're, every single time somebody had an idea, well, it's like, okay, well, let's just do an MVP. Let's just test it. And it changed it where it wasn't anymore like I feel wouldn't work anymore, because people would just be like, well, let's just test it. And it removed ego tremendously. The entire culture started changing, where it was a much more data-driven process and it was a lot less ego. And because of that, people felt a lot more able to speak up, and they felt like they were more heard. And there was a lot less, there's a lot more collaboration, and it just completely changed everything. And obviously that's like iterative, you know, like what's the compound interest of just everyone feeling like they can share learnings and it's more idea meritocracy is the way Ray Dalio talks about it in Principles, is like establishing that idea meritocracy. And that's very much so like what we've been trying to establish with all these teams. So as much as what we do is strategy based, a lot of it is very much so process based as well, and just trying to get these teams in alignment.
We need both, you know. I mean, you can't, I mean, because you need strong operations and you need strong strategy to be able to really like scale a business to a very, very substantial number. Absolutely. You know, this is actually a good idea, a good time to maybe summarize some of the takeaways here, and maybe you could throw in some new ones as well. Like, what are some takeaways, ideally around 3, that you'd like to pass on to the audience from today's episode that can help them be able to grow and scale their e-com businesses?
Yeah, I think the first one is, you know, what are you optimizing for? Both like as a brand, but also like you in your own life. And if you're, you know, you're a leader, you're a director, you're a founder, what are you optimizing for? And is it in alignment? Because if it's not in alignment, then you kind of have 2 avenues. You have one where you need to try and you know, navigate the mission and what you're doing to align with what your purpose is, or you need to exit, you know, and you need to go elsewhere. And that's something that a lot of people don't do, and that's doing a disservice to both yourself and your team. I think the second thing is you know, what are the assumptions? Now that you know what you're optimizing for better, and you have an idea of where you're going, now what are your assumptions with that? And then how, the third one would be like, how can you test it? How can you do an MVP? How can you test this as quickly as possible and then go? And like one quick example is that, like, for example, with the search, I mean, SEO is kind of my background. And a lot of times when I come in, people are like, we want to do SEO, we want to do this, we want to do that. This is the kind of content we want to do. And I'm like, oh, okay. Why? And they'll tell me. And a lot of it, again, is like, I feel this, I feel that. It's not usually backed on data. So what we'll do is we'll say, okay, well, let's test some of these assumptions. Let's actually try some paid, going to a couple examples of this. Let's do some paid ads, throw it at this content, see if it works. Because if it works, then, okay, let's now develop out an organic strategy to own this space. But let's try and figure out if we can vet these ideas very quickly before we start investing in long-term organic content, which is going to take a long time to produce, heavy cost if you're doing it right, and a long time to rank. So I'm always trying to figure out, you know, how can we quickly test these assumptions and get an MVP going.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. Everything you mentioned, you know, spot on. And you know, I'd love for us to like go into our bonus round here and put you on the spot a little bit, because we always put guests on the spot during the Ecom Performance Marketing Show. And this last round here in the interview is where I basically will ask you 4 questions, and you have to answer each question with only 1 word. Everybody always has a blast with it.
I like to talk. This is to be hard.
I know. I hear you. It's all good though. This is going to be a good test, good challenge. Because you know your control. Your control is you like to use more than 1 word, right?
Yeah.
So now you have to test using only 1 word. So anyway, we're talking marketing speak here, but all right. What caused your biggest e-com success to date?
Experimentation.
Nice. And I love how that kind of gravitates to the theme of like this episode, because we've talked a lot about experimentation, using data, you know, with surveys, and then also how to test and what to focus on and how to double down. So that is really awesome that you use that specific word for that. What advice do you have for other e-com business owners?
Reinvest.
So why'd you choose that? Because that might be something we can teach on.
Yeah, I think it's that a lot of times it's reinvesting both in yourself and in your team and what the mission is and in the business. And a lot of the times it gets sidetracked because people are just like, again, it's like random acts of improvement. People just want to like keep building and building and building and grow and grow and grow. But it's like reinvest in your core, reinvest in the fundamentals. You know, it's just like my buddy, my colleague Zaid, he's got this thing, and when COVID hit, he's just like, this is Oregon Trail. We're going back. It's just you and your gun. We're going back to first principles of business. It's innovate or die. And I'm just like, yeah. And I think that this is kind of just awakening people to realize that like they need to reinvest in themselves and their team.
Yeah.
And go back to first principles and do stuff that really matters instead of just chasing endless revenue or whatever else. It needs to have intent. You know?
Definitely. You know, I love also, this kind of goes back to what you said earlier in the episode about how a leader wasn't in touch with his personnel and they had different views of the brand. And that's a leadership failure, basically. And what you're stating is, you know, if going back to that example, if we were talking about that example specifically, that leader needs to invest in himself and his leadership abilities, because that shouldn't happen in a company. You know, your team should be 100% aligned with, you know, your vision, your brand, etc. And if they're not, that's on you. You need to take ownership of that.
Yeah. I think the lack of taking ownership is a really big issue with founders. I think a lot of them like to march to the beat of their own drum, which I'm totally one of those people. But I think that a lot of times people start their own businesses because they don't want to be told what to do or whatever else. But what happens often is that once they hit a certain point of success, they get caught in an echo chamber. I like to call it the Steve Jobs issue, where like you just got a bunch of people around you telling you how great you are or whatever else, and like it's great until it's not, because basically people won't confront you and then they'll just leave. And that's where it's like, I think that extreme ownership, it's really, your defense mechanism is there to basically just be like, hey, well, that person left because of this, and this. It's not your fault. You were doing all these things. And it's just like, no, actually, you just need to stare yourself in the mirror and be like, okay, this was my fault. I messed up. This person, totally. this core person on my team, I wasn't listening to them. I wasn't doing whatever. Great books on like Extreme Ownership by _𝐂𝐻𝐿.
Good book.
Essentialism by Greg McKeown is
Great
one
book
I really
too.
recommend to people. There's other ones like, you know, The Effective Executive by Peter Drucker, a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, I think investing in being a leader, that's kind of the tide that raises all ships. That's not a very sexy thing, but I think that is a lot of what we need right now.
Definitely. Well, you know, the paranoid survive. You never get comfortable, basically. And that's actually a great book too, The Paranoid Survive, by the former CEO of Intel, Andrew Grove. So I definitely really liked that book when I read through it. And especially going back to talking about Intel from 15, 20 years ago when they were really booming. And that's really when I got into like computers, and I used to build computers. I got into hardware, you got into software, basically. And you know, it's a great book, but it just teaches you as a leader that, you know, you need to stay paranoid, you need to be proactive, and not ever get to a point where you're reactive. Always look for the inflection points. That's what they talk about, the 10x inflection points that are happening around you in your business or in your industry. This way you could be proactive in making sure that doesn't affect your company's growth. And on top of that, just stay in touch with your team members. If that's your role as a leader in your company, then you need to touch base with each of your team members on a fairly consistent basis. This way you're always in the loop on how they're doing, how they're feeling, how they're, you know, interpreting everything with the vision, with the goals of the company, you know, things like that. Because your company's driven by your personnel, and so you have to take care of your personnel.
Yeah, 100%. That's the tide that raises all ships. Like, absolutely.
Yep. Definitely. All right, back to one word. How would you describe yourself?
Intuitive.
I can see that, definitely. All right, and then what do you see in your future?
Teaching. Being a teacher.
Nice, awesome. Well, man, it's been great. Thanks for being on the show and, you know, spending some time with us today. How can the audience follow up on this episode and learn more from you and you know, follow you in your journey?
Been increasingly using LinkedIn. Went through and did kind of a clean sweep of my LinkedIn account, and it's gotten a lot better. I actually like LinkedIn now.
Nice.
But,
I know it has.
I I recommend checking us out. Josh Boone on LinkedIn. You can follow us, our little adventure on Pure Web Results on there, the company profile. PureWebResults.com if you want to kind of check out some of the work that we've done. And overall, honestly, just say hi on LinkedIn. I love talking to people. I love having conversations. So if there's anything you want to talk about at all, just give me a shout. Pretty easy to get a hold of. So
awesome. Yeah. Okay. Well, Josh, thank you so much for being on the show and spending some time with us today. And guys, go to LinkedIn, click on the link below wherever you're seeing this. This way you can go ahead and you could follow Josh. And if you're listening to this and you're not actually seeing this because you're on iTunes or Google Play, just go to LinkedIn, search for Josh Boone, and also his company as well, Global Web Results as well. So Josh, thank you so much, man, for being on the show. I truly appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, brother. Take it easy.
Thank you for tuning into the e-commerce performance marketing show. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment with a timestamp of your favorite part and share it with a friend. Until our next episode, here's to you and the success of your e-commerce business.